it's officially fantasy draft season. That's what we can definitely say. And here on the podcast, we're kicking it off this week with Strategy Week. We're going to have a podcast today, Wednesday, and Friday this week. And then starting next week, life is over. No more outside time, no more friends, no more family. Say goodbye to them because the show is 5 days a week on the podcast. I'm here every Monday to Friday, baby. Living the freaking dream. I mean, it's exciting and it is electric. So each week in August, there's going to be a central theme to all the podcasts. This week is Strategy Week. Next week is Rankings Week, Position Previews, followed by Conviction Weeks. And then boom, we end August with Cram Week and we get into the season. And to start off this draft season prep, every Monday, we're bringing back Mock Draft Monday. Not like the mock drafts for the NFL draft, fantasy mock drafts, baby. If you have one good idea, you just got to recycle it and reuse it. So that's what we're doing here with Mock Draft Monday. We're doing our fantasy mock drafts on the website. We're going to go through them here. And Nate was kind enough to join us, fantasy plebes, get down in the muck for a dynasty mock draft. Nate, so that's what we're going to be recapping today. Kind of our 5 biggest. It could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 cells. Sure, they can put 5 in the title, but we have like 100 mock draft observations from that dynasty mock draft. So, Nate, you got down in the muck with us here for a 1 quarterback dynasty startup draft. But I know you play dynasty. So what makes dynasty fun in your opinion?
Well, I also, and we didn't do it this way, but dynasty leagues that are super flexes. Which making that the quarterback can also play the flex position, and also no defense, no special or defense and special teams, no kicker. It's just position players, skill position players. And what I like about it is I get to use my work. I studied the draft. I write about the draft. I also, in other ways, I'm studying the league week in, week out. So get to kind of use a little bit of that, a little bit of crossover for fantasy. I also just like that element. I like competition, so I there's a lot of it. I love football. I love all the elements of fantasy, but dynasty wise, it's so great because if you do like someone in the draft, it's not, oh, this is it. You just get them for this 1 year. Who cares if you liked him as a rookie? I'm drafting him next year in the first round, or I'm drafting him for $62 when the year before no one even heard of him and I could have gotten him for $2. I was in some keeper leagues, keeper redraft leagues, and I liked those, but it was still, David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell were 2 of my biggest hits, but it was like by the time I was get to really use them, I was like, okay, that's it. I only got him for 2 or 3 years. So dynasty, at least it's like, if I like Puka Nacua, he's mine. Now that he's mine for as long as I want him. And I like that as someone that really follows the league. I think there's a lot of football fans out there, and it kind of, maybe if you want something a little deeper and a little bit more of like show your work and show how much you like the league, I think dynasty is a kind of good way to do that because it's a different element of really ball knowledge, I would say.
100%. And I'm glad that you introed it that way because and I am just saying this off the top. I'm not throwing shade at anybody else who does dynasty content or anybody else who plays dynasty. Like, you want to do it this way? That's the great part about this. You can play it this way. I do not view it as like collecting value or collecting assets or like this guy has now pushed up into this stratosphere where, oh, now he's a sell high or, something like that because his quote value, his industry value, whatever, people view him higher than where he should be, all this stuff. I just like players, okay? I like players and I like football, and I'm glad we've introduced it that way because to me, that is the fun part about playing this. To me, it's not, okay, I've drafted Drake London, because I was a big fan of him coming out of USC, and now his values reach this point where actually I probably should sell him based on the hype. Like, no, I want it to come to fruition on my team, right? I want to like Drake London and then and hang on to him through the misery, the miserable parts of his first 2 years, and then have it hit in the 3rd year. And I want that to happen on my team because I like the player and I like just the idea of who he is. So that is the fun part about Dynasty. It's a way, Nate, I think, honestly, to appreciate the player aspect of the game even more. Because I don't mean to be all hokey and sentimental, but without the players, we have nothing, right? Like it should be, I always come back to football guys and Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom, the coaching tree in the industry that I come off of, their whole thing was like glory to the players, man, because without those guys, like none of this happens and we don't get to play in this weird little sandbox that we do. So to me, I think actually Dynasty is a way to further that and be more invested in that player appreciation, as opposed to just like, well, yeah, this team's going to probably stink this year. They're going to throw the ball a lot in trailing situations. So there might be some value we can scrape off that way. I don't know. To me, again, I think it allows you to get deeper into the player investment aspect of it. And that's why I love this game.
Yeah, and it makes you understand situations a little bit more with teams, because like you said, it's not just, all right, we used him for a year. Okay, this guy that I just drafted in the second round this year, I'll never think of him again. If you're just kind of more of a casual plus fan, I'll say, maybe someone that wants to get a little deeper now, like you said, investment in it, especially if there's money involved, you're going to really like players. I mean, shoot, you just see right now with College Football 25 coming back out, is you see people again in dynasty leagues, like, for that version of dynasty, you get attached to players like you do. You're like, and like you said, I'm sure there's so many players that you have, the Nico Collinses of the world, the Rashad Batemans of the world. Like, there's some running backs. Trust me, I have plenty of shares of, and I'll talk about one of them. But I do think it's fun where you can just draft your dudes. Draft the guy you like. And I think with dynasty is you can make more arguments for it. Well, it's not for this year. It's for, I think the situation will improve next year, or I know he's older, but hey, I'm going to get 2 good years out of him. I'm going to make all these types of arguments for some of my players that I drafted. So, but I think that's fun with dynasty, because you're not just focused on the next 7-8 months. You're focused on the next 7-8 years in some guys' cases. So I think that's, I think that's just another element. Like, I love that you're saying just focus on the players, because as someone even growing up around the game, I think good coaches I've ever been around always just say, well, it's the players. I'm lucky enough to have coached that player. Kind of fantasy a little bit. It's like, I'm lucky enough to have, quote unquote, owned that player in fantasy, which is, I think, a fun element.
100%, man. I remember the Play Callers podcast that Jordan Rodriguez did over The Athletic.
Yeah.
And like listening, number one is great. And even though it was done last year, it would still hold up if you haven't listened to it. I know I've referenced it on the show before. But Mike McDaniel, who's like one of the biggest schemers on the scheme lords on the planet, right? And I think we did the top 10 offenses on Football 301, and we were just like, gotta hand it to him. Like, we didn't even do like a full breakdown on them, despite the fact that we all kind of had them as a universally great offense. And I think a lot of it is because we appreciate just how much creativity goes into putting that offense together and the things they throw at defenses that are really tough to defend in September and October and into November, maybe just a little bit. But even
hopefully a lot of home games in December there.
But even Mike McDaniel, the guy who puts that offense together that is so interesting schematically, on that podcast, he's constantly coming back to, play callers think they get it in their head, it's all about them. It's not about us at all. Like, it's about the players. And like, he would do like halftime interviews, and I always come back to one on Sunday Night Football. I can't remember the game, but the sideline reporter's like, Mike, what did you do in the first half? He's like, well, I didn't do anything, but the guys on the field did this, that, and the other. So yeah, I mean, I always try to make that the central ethos of this podcast, even as we're talking about this game about a game. It should always be focused on the players. And you're so right that you get that extra level of investment in it. And sometimes, if you're me, you take a Sky Moore and you're like, hey, it's not going to work this year, but year 2, that's when it's really, this is the year. And then it's not the year, but hopefully for some guys along the way, it really does become that. But okay.